little bit about me. I've been involved in consulting and investment banking for almost 20 years now. I've done various roles: program manager, project manager, business analyst, SME. Um, I've done dozens of projects. Really have a passion for bringing things all the way to the end. It's a challenge for me. Operations, working in routine work, was never something that was for me. So I started my career as a banker and then became an accountant afterwards. And then that's when I realized that that really wasn't for me. And then by accident, I got involved in project work. And so here I am today. On my spare time, I lecture at the University of Miami, where I teach an M&A course. And I'm kind of using a lot of the material that we have, the same type of approach, where we go through case studies, we discuss, we learn from each other. So please don't be shy. You can ask questions after the case study, and then we'll kind of keep it interactive like that. The objective is to learn from one another. We only have an hour to do that, so let's uh, let's keep it as efficient as we can. So, as an introduction, finance and finance projects, or finance as stakeholder, is usually a key stakeholder on large scale projects. You think of ERPs, you think of mergers and acquisitions, launching new products. Um, I've broken it down into four categories that are all kind of interrelated, starting from the top down. So, we'll talk about how finance can help align projects and program teams with organizational strategy. We'll talk about why it's important to have finance representation um, on project governance, and we'll go through an example where finance was not on a key project and what happened to that project. Finance staff can also help with risk management, whether it be enterprise risk management and risk assessments on projects. So, depending on the size of the organization, they may or may not be more involved. And then finally, we'll take a look at an example of data and analytics, how finance can help structure not just the integrity of the data, but also all the reporting processes and controls that go around creating dashboards for marketing or other business lines across the organization, and what happens when you don't include that type of framework or know how to a reporting project. So before we get started, question, and you can put your answers in the chat box. How involved is your finance team in aligning projects to your corporate strategy? Very involved, somewhat involved, rarely involved, or not involved at all. Again, of course, it depends on the size and scale of the either your clients or the organization that you're in. But I just want to get an idea of uh, how involved they are. So maybe I'll just take a look quickly.
Looks like B is a front runner.
B is the
Usually,
front runner.
a few
Somewhat
A's, a few.
involved. B A B A.
Yes,
Okay. Okay. So
we have two B's, three A's so far.
okay. So good. So that's good. So they're heavily involved. Okay. Great. So before I get started, we'll go through the top to bottom approach that I use. So I've been doing this for a very long time. I typically get assigned to engagements or projects that are not going very well, and in order to get up to speed very quickly, I developed this framework where I go top down, right? So on the top of this figure that we have all the strategic management level. What's the org strategy? How does finance support the organizational strategy? What capabilities does finance need to have in order to better support the business lines and the rest of the organization? How do we draw up a target operating model to build out those capabilities over time? And all of those are structured into investments in a portfolio and project program management allocation, resource allocation. Then we start going down towards the bottom. Uh, what does the organizational project management process look like in the organization? And so the top purple row is where I see most of the issues on the project management side. When we have, I broke it down into governance, requirements management, and scope management, and all kind of cascade one another. So first off, I like to look at the governance structure. Who are the people involved? Who are the players? What are their governance roles and responsibilities in decision making or bringing resources, things like that. The second thing I look at is the requirements. Right away, I need to understand what are the requirements, how are they compiled, are they up to date, are they being managed, are they well written, or not well written, or not written at all. And that gives me a good idea as to where the project is kind of landed. I think it says a lot about the project. And then finally, if your requirements are not clear or they're not high quality, right away you're going to have issues with scope. And if scope is an issue, then the rest of your project, meaning your resources, your budget, your timeline, your capacity planning, all those things become at risk. So that's kind of the top line, the management side, and the bottom side is more the operating model. What is it that we're building exactly? So finance stakeholders can help a lot with all of these items to get things done right the first time. So I kind of go through this checklist. First of all, I want to know, let's say we're building an ERP or we're building some sort of system integration. I want to know, was there an analysis that was done before we started the project, right? When that's not done, typically we start finding all sorts of things as we move forward in the project. And then we have to go up and say, well, what are the requirements? Oh, that wasn't in scope. And then, it becomes this cycle of a lot of surprises that pop up. So get your analysis done before you start the project. In a finance project, it's very important. We need to understand, okay, what are the business lines in scope? What are the products? How do the products work? What are all the events associated with those products? What are the business processes? How are they supported? And the systems architecture. So right away, I know that if the project team didn't consider one of these items, there's a risk somewhere, right? If you don't know how the process works, you don't know how the systems are going to capture those processes. And if you don't have your systems architecture, you don't know how the systems are interacting with each other. And then that kind of turns into major issues, or can turn into major issues later on down the project. A full set of business requirements for a finance stakeholder. You need to know your accounting entries. What are your data elements? All your reporting requirements, management reporting, financial reporting, regulatory reporting, all your controls. So your reconciliations, your checks and balances. And if you're doing a system conversion, your migrations. You need to know all of that code, or else, again, you're going to have issues as you move forward in the project. So these are the core elements from a business and finance perspective. If this is clean, then your functional requirements should be clean, your build should be clean, your QA process, what are we testing, how are we testing, what are we omitting in our testing for whatever reason, your UAT plan, right? All your test case scenarios, expected results, defect management, prioritization, then it should be smoother as you go into operations. Right? Change management is not last. I just put it last, but technically you don't want to omit this. You want this to go all along the chain. And that's pretty much it. So I go through this checkboard. If something is missing, I know there's an issue, and we'll take a look at some specific examples later on. Okay, so let's talk about organizational strategy. Large organizations, or every organization, should have differentiating factors. How do they compete, right? What is it that makes us different? What is our mission or vision? Why are we in business? What is our purpose and whatnot? And typically in larger organizations, you have a corporate level strategy. You have many divisions that map up to that organizational level strategy. So by geographical region, by product line, some sort of logical business unit grouping. And then that should cascade down to the employee level, right? So this is what is known as alignment in strategic management. And so from bottom to top, you want the employees to have a clear line of sight as to how they help the division and then how they help the organization, how they build out capabilities, and how they help the organization be more competitive. And on the right side, same concept here. Um, you typically have KPIs to assess performance. And so these KPIs cascade downwards, meaning you have corporate level objectives. Okay, how does the division contribute to the corporate level strategy? KPIs should map. And the same thing with your employees and their various roles and activities, they should map up forward as well. Okay. So from a very high level, that's organizational strategy / performance management. And you're probably asking, okay, well, why is this relevant to project management? Let's take an example where we're building out a PMO. Okay. So you're in a somewhat mature organization. The time has come to build out a PMO. You're assigned as a project manager. And then we'll take a look and see how finance can help the project team build out the PMO, right? So the PMO is there to support some sort of strategy. Um, it can be a corporate function. It can be a PMO within the business line. Depending on the corporate strategy, what is it that they're trying to do? But the point is that when you start building any business unit, I just took a PMO because we can all relate to it. It's okay, what are the capabilities that we need in this business unit to help us execute our strategy, right? So this is what we call a capability model. So here from left to right, I don't want to go through all of them. That's not the purpose, but it's to say we need to have a strategic alignment and governance for our PMO to be effective. We need to have our PMO processes and methods. We need to have the competencies, right? The right mix of people, project managers, change agents, business analysts, and so forth. What are the technologies that we're going to use, right? Jira, Confluence, what have you, for all of these capabilities and so on. So you're putting a project plan together, right? You have your scope, your budget. How can finance help this project team build out the PMO? I think the first thing is that finance, given that they have a broad view of the organization, their responsibility is to create value for shareholders. They can help emphasize the importance of the PMO from a strategic perspective and how it contributes to strategy, how it contributes to executing and delivering value. Number two, return on investment, right? So it costs us this much in CapEx, this much in OpEx, the setup costs. What does this bring to our shareholders, in year 5, year 6, year 7, and so on? Budgeting and forecasting. So I think everyone knows that's kind of a core finance capability. Performance measurement, right? How are we going to score the PMO? What are the performance indicators for this business unit that we're going to track and monitor, right? And that depends on the strategy. So if we have a PMO that's there to launch new products, for example, smartphones or what have you, then maybe that PMO will be much closer to the business line, right? And they'll have performance measurement scorecards like based on quality, based on sales, and so on. You might have an IT PMO, so that might be scored more on efficiency, quality, things like that. So that's how you link the PMO to organizational strategy. Compensation systems, right? So the performance should map to those results that we're looking for, and people should be compensated, right? So if you have people that are not performing on the PMO for whatever reason, they don't meet their objectives, then their compensation should be skewed based on those objectives. And finance can help develop those KPIs, make sure they make sense for the roles. And then how does all that map to return on investment, earnings per share, and so on. And of course, the two big ones at the bottom, internal controls. So when you set up any business unit, you need to understand the processes, the systems, the people, how they work, and what are the control systems in place to make sure that it's meeting business objectives and governance. So from a high level, that's how finance can contribute to linking org strategy, the divisional unit strategy, in building business units and getting these projects done right the first time, right? So meaning if you're missing any one of those items when you're building out a business unit, it's the same thing in M&A. If you're acquiring a business, finance can help say, okay, well, how are we going to operate? How are we going to measure performance? And walk through the same process that we just walked through. Okay, so then I'll ask a question, and then after I'll take some questions, some comments, some feedback about this particular case. So, question is, what's the major benefit of aligning projects to org strategy from a finance perspective? Is it improving project timelines, reducing stakeholder involvement? Is it better resource allocation and financial returns, or increased complexity in reporting?
Better resource allocation and financial returns is coming in strong. We always have 100%.
And I have some very good questions here too. So C, anyone else? C.
And John, we're managing a chat, so we'll let you know what's coming in, so you don't have to change your view. Because there were two comments I do want to share with you that were made. One was from Dr. Calvin. He noted translating corporate KPIs to user KPI language has always been a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then Cornelius asked the question, maybe you're coming to this, but who is responsible for driving the alignment with organizational strategy?
Okay, so let's start with the first question. So yes, it is challenging because you need to. So I guess is the question is why is it challenging, or is it just a comment?
Dr. Calvin, I don't know if you want to come up, mute, to just give a little bit of backing to your comment, or it's just a question that you have. If you'd like to come up, mute.
It's primarily been a language communication issue between leadership and the end user. Trying to align KPIs has always been a challenge. It actually slows down a lot of the performance metrics, trying to help translate something coming from C-level coming down to the actual user level. And I think it's just a constant communication challenge that probably everybody faces.
Yeah, it's thank you for clarifying, Doctor. So I was looking at it not necessarily from a user, but a perspective, but more from, let's say, an employee perspective, an employee within the PMO, and in the PMO reporting to either corporate office or the business line. And yeah, it is complicated because not everyone necessarily agrees with the metrics, or they don't want to be scored. They don't want to have the visibility of that metric on them. So I guess the right way to do it is, number one, we all agree on what the corporate measures are. So that requires, and we're going to get into governance, but that requires transparency from top to bottom, right? Number two, the actual business unit. I mean, if you take example of a sales business, it's easy to score. You want sales, you want customer retention, you want, what do they call it? Net promoter score to be high. In a PMO, it might be a little bit ambiguous. And then, of course, you need to cascade those measures down to what the employee is doing in their activities and measure those. So, yes, it's challenging. I can have a whole discussion on that, but from a high level, that's how you kind of need to approach it. It's a top-down approach, and it's a buy-in from everyone. For the second question, sorry, can you repeat the second question? Is how do you lead these types of projects? Is that the question?
The second comment was for Cornelius. He said, maybe you're coming to this, but who is responsible for driving the alignment with organizational strategy?
Okay, so that comes into governance as well. So typically, the textbook tells us strategy is everyone's responsibility, but it's upper management's responsibility, the board, to pass down to the executive team and say, this is how we're competing, these are our target customers, this is what we're going to do, and so on. So that's the highest level of the organization. That message needs to cascade downwards, and the managers and line managers and employees are responsible for executing on that strategy. So I don't know if that answers that question, but typically that's how it works in a I would say a more mature, larger organization. In a mid-sized organization of a few hundred employees, same concept, but the board is much more typically involved. The entrepreneur might still be involved, but still the responsibility comes to the highest level of the organization.
And then I received one more question from our president, Corey. She wrote, multiple factors could be true at the same time: chapter reorganization, change management, resource management, major platform migration. From a financial perspective, with projects, in what order would you prioritize these?
That's a great question. I would say it's very circumstantial. So I always come back to the requirements first. What requirements are met? What is the impact if we have unmet requirements? What is the impact? Do we get fined? Do people have to do a lot of manual work? What are the risks associated with that? And so on. And then as we're kind of prioritizing those requirements, some of them are more complex than others. We had an example of a migration that you just said. How do we migrate? So we take a look at what are the project objectives, the timeline, the resources, the people that we have, the complexity with those requirements, and we have to. It's a constant balancing act, right? Like constant balancing act. So I can't give you a direct answer because it's very circumstantial. But the starting point is the requirements and the impact of meeting or not meeting those requirements.
So she also noted, so it's like a decision tree in a way.
A decision tree, but very circumstantial, right? Because if you have, let's say, you don't have enough resources to meet these requirements as per the project timeline, and they say, okay, well, we could onboard resources, all right, but it's going to take them 2 months to train them. It's like a constant trade-off, right? So I wouldn't say it's as mechanistic as a decision tree, but those are all the factors that you would consider to say, okay, based on all of these items and these requirements, this is our revised plan, or this is our way forward. And, this is our way forward. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. So I hate to be vague, but it's very circumstantial, and we'll see some specific examples. So maybe we can move on if there's no questions, because now we're getting into governance, which is directly linked to top down, and we're going to get into project execution and project governance. So first question, does your governance team currently have finance representation in any of those structures? Yes, fully integrated, sometimes, rarely, or not involved at all. So maybe you can give me an idea of what the responses are. Okay, I'll just go take a look quickly. So
we have a couple of 2 C's and we have 1 B.
Okay, so. Okay, so we're going to
3
see
B's actually.
So
yeah,
okay,
we
so
got
that's
2
good.
C's.
Okay, good. So
I was going to say I'm not really sure in terms of my organization.
Well, we have the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so okay, good. So we're good on time. Okay, so project governance, right? So reflecting what we talked about earlier, the cascading effect, the top-down approach. It's the same thing in a project governance structure. So I adapted this from the PMI 6th edition. We have our organizational governance, so the board and so on. we have our project management processes, right, and our structure. We have portfolio level, so you can have multiple portfolios. Then your program structure, so multiple programs in that program governance. And I'm going to focus on this one, the project governance level. So you can have many projects flowing into a particular program, and this is where a lot of the challenges have, because that's where you have a lot of the operational work that's being done, which is much less strategic and managerial at the higher levels. So how can finance help to be part of this project governance structure, right? So I took a sample of, or an example of, at least project level governance that I've seen commonly, and I split it in two. So those that do the work, and then those that help guide the project. Of course, governance is specific to the size and complexity of the project. So let's just assume it's a 1 year medium sized project. Typically you would see something like this. So so from a governance level, how can finance help make better decisions or provide guidance to the governance team? I think the first one is value, right? So ideally, in an ideal world, finance experts tend to be unbiased, or they're supposed to be unbiased in their assessment and more factual. So what is the ROI? What is the cost? How does it impact our timeline? What are our exposures? And so on. So that's one of the key benefits of having finance staff on your governance team. Risk reward balance. So if we take a decision A, or if we increase the timeline or the budget, what is the risk? What is the potential reward? How do we mitigate it? And we'll get to mitigation later. Resource trade-offs. So maybe more scope with more resources, or longer timeline with less resources, and so on. So they can help support that discussion as well. And finally, very important, regulatory requirements. In a heavily regulated industry like banking or energy, it can be extremely costly to miss those types of requirements. So very important that you have finance representation for these reasons here. Now, the execution team, where all the action happens, right? The scrums and the meetings and where are we landed? You were supposed to do this last week, it wasn't done, and so forth. How can finance help? Well, finance people tend to be very technical. So more than just, let's say, an IT has their expertise, a business analyst has their expertise, a developer, and so on. But a person that's technical should have a broader view of these things, and they can help add value by maybe asking right questions, understanding the data. What does the data actually mean? What is it telling us, right? So they can add value there. Broad view of the business. So maybe they can help the team better understand, well, why are we doing this? We had our project outcomes and objectives in the charter, so let's stick to that because this is the financial impact, and so on. Number 3, requirements management. Again, I always come back to requirements. 9 out of 10 projects that are behind, like materially behind, or not going in the direction it's supposed to be going in, it's because the requirements are not clear and you're spinning, right? Like, it's not clear, I don't know what to do, and so on. So I think finance is in a good position to understand what a lot of those requirements are, and they can help the project team say, well, we should prioritize requirement A because the impact of not having it is B versus this one. Interrelationships of requirements. Sometimes there's a hierarchy. You need to be able to identify those things. So I think finance can add a lot of value there. And that leads to the last item, your software development lifecycle activities, testing, UAT, QA, building out the test case scenarios, making sure that they're compliant, that they're well documented, and so on. So by having finance staff on your governance team, and your execution team, the likelihood of you missing requirements, falling behind on your project, missing, how do you say, producing quality that's not aligned with expectations because you're in a rush, and getting things moving, right, against your timeline, can be very beneficial to you. Right? So for those of you that don't have finance representation on your projects, I would at least ask for it, if it's pertinent. If the finance team says it's not like pertinent for us, like if you're building like a website with not much content or no financial transactions on it versus an ERP system that has all the processes and all the reports and all the events across the organization, I would typically have finance staff on the project. So what we're going to do now, we're going to look at two case studies on project governance. I'm going to let you, we're going to go over the scenario. I'm going to step away for a minute or two, let you think about it. I want to listen to your thoughts or maybe an example that you've seen in practice, and then we'll take a look at what actually happened. So scenario one, stakeholder identification and management. A large global bank was deploying a new trade finance system for its North American operations. It was using this system in other parts of the world. It was part of a broader transformation program in North America. And just some key considerations. The project team thought that since the system was used already in the organization in other parts of the world, that it was a lift and shift into the North American platform, that it should be very easy and straightforward. Finance was not originally part of this project scope. And then finally, since finance had some key requirements, right? Like all three reporting requirements, they subsequently added them to the project later on, like a year late, right? So just take a minute to think about that. What do you think the impacts are? And then we'll take some hands. Any questions from the audience or a hypothesis of what may happen to that project?
I don't have anything in the chat right now so far, John, but if anyone wants to come off of mute or share your thoughts in the chat, please feel free to do so.
Maybe, John, if you could share the screen, share the question, please.
Irina, were you coming off mute to share your thoughts?
No, I just wanted to see the slide. Thank you.
So we have scope change and delayed. So good observation. Anything else? Okay, so if there's nothing else, I'll walk you through what happened. So, okay, so
John,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Someone said a different pattern has to be in use.
Sorry, a different what?
A different pattern has to be in use.
In
Has
use?
to be used.
A different pattern. What do they mean by pattern?
Mercedes, do you want to explain your answer?
Yes, we're talking about different cultures. We're talking about a model that was applied in Europe and Asia, and that we want to apply now in North America. There's a lot going on in differences in culture, especially, and type of communications, so on. Everything that entails tailoring a situation to be transferred across the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
There will be a lot. That's what comes to my mind.
Absolutely, valid point. So yeah, it was a European investment bank operating in the United States and across Asia. We had developers in India, representatives from Europe, North America. So yeah, absolutely, definitely a challenge. So if
I
nothing
would
else,
just add,
yes.
this is Tamika, I'm sorry for cutting you off. I would just add that currency rates, so the exchange of the dollar versus you're talking about the EU, and then also talking about SOC 2 compliance, security stuff, all those things, NIST controls, but the biggest thing that stands out to me from a financial aspect is the different rate of exchange in currency.
Mhm. Okay, fair point. Anything else? Okay, good. All good responses. So let's talk about some of the items. So I can tell you that the system did not integrate very well. Okay, not necessarily because of cultural, but because the products were not the same. The trade finance products were not the same. Okay. Number two, the project was already behind schedule and budget, and then they onboarded finance. Okay, and being in the banking industry, the Federal Reserve has very strict reporting requirements when it comes to financial information, client information. It needs to be timely, accurate, and complete. This system did not meet those requirements compared to European central bank. So that was another issue. They abandoned the project. So finally, after about 2 years and a half, initially it was a 1 year project. After 2 years and a half, they abandoned it. And then what they did is that they decided to keep their existing system and modernize it to meet certain reporting requirements. And it was a success. Okay. So lessons learned. Number one, no one looked at the system before. They assumed because it works in Europe, everything is going to be great in North America. Whenever you hear terms like plug and play, lift and shift, I don't believe in that term. It's always requirements, right? Are we meeting requirements or not meeting requirements? Because things evolve over time, right? Just because you had a system 3 years ago and you're moving it to the cloud now, for example, it doesn't mean that you're meeting requirements. So that's the first lesson. The second lesson. And of course, number three, finance is always a key stakeholder. So even if the trade people, the business and the IT folks, they configure the system, the business can operate, but you cannot file those reports. Your system is not reliable. It's not producing accurate and complete information that's a representation of that business line and those products. You're not going to get a sign off from a finance team. No way. So so what all of you said is correct. It's exactly that. But I think it started for all of these three things. So if I go back to my tree quickly, right? They skipped the first step. They skipped the second step. They didn't really get the third step right if you don't get these. And then the rest, well, it's a chain reaction, right? Okay. So this is why this guide is so helpful.
And John, as you're going on, there was a comment in chat by Cornelius. He said the project needs to go through a partial resetup. Costs will be different once the replanning is done. There may be a big impact down the line or other regions planning to integrate.
Fair assessment. In this case, the architecture, so the systems architecture in an investment bank is very complicated. We have liquidity reporting, client reporting, financial reporting. You have all sorts of different products that all interconnect. So getting that system into the North American architecture was much more complicated than they thought. But that thought process, I agree with it, to say, okay, well, how can we accommodate this type of system? It wasn't that type of system, unfortunately. Okay, another one. This touches more on, and I think there was a question, it's like, what type of project delivery strategy should we use to build out a PMO? Here I have an example where a SOX compliance project. They delivered an agile. So it was a large regulated institution. They were automating their SOX compliance process. Things to consider. The requirements, okay, the requirements for this attestation process. I mean, we're getting specific, but it's important because this is what delayed the project 6 months. Business units, who's responsible for that unit, what business process in that organization are we talking about, systems, controls, testing. So basically all your SOX requirements. Number 2, they were migrating kind of like a piecemeal systems into one big risk management system. And then number 3, because the project team again said, oh, well, we have a similar system today. We're just migrating to this big consolidated system. We can start configuring it right away. So again, I'll take your thoughts and your feedback on this. Let's take a minute. So what happened in this project? Okay. Any guesses?
There's one comment by Cornelius. He said, this project should be run in a hybrid model, especially since the requirements are finite SOX. A water agile would work, but time boxed.
Very good assessment.
Anyone else want to come off mute or put any comment in the chat?
Okay. Very good, Cornelius. So basically what happened is that if you look at these requirements here, there's dependencies on them, right? You cannot send out an attestation if you don't know what your business units are, and your systems, processes, and controls all map to the business unit. So the project team started doing agile mode, creating JIRAs all over the place, but didn't understand the process and didn't understand the requirements related to SOX. Okay. So although they had a finance representative on the team, I don't think that particular resource had sufficient a detailed knowledge of how systems work and how they're interrelated. So this is point number 2. Number 3, so the lesson here is if you want to deliver an agile, that's fine, but you need to know the end-to-end process and you need to know the requirements. So this particular team just, user story, JIRA, everything is great. And then they were late on this regulatory project. And what happened was, we had to reassess the requirements, reassess their dependencies, and they managed to deliver before the end of the year. But it created quite a bit of rework because of this. So they had to go back, undo what they did, reconfigure, retest, do regression testing, and all those things. So lessons learned: know your end-to-end processes, know your requirements, your systems. Again, agile is fine. We used a hybrid approach because once we had our requirements and our processes and how they all map to each other, then it was easy to understand what we were configuring and what we were testing. And for a SOX project, anything related to controls, you need to have finance staff there. They can share that. So great observations.
John, there was one more observation by butchering your name, Irana, where she put the system must be able to integrate into the existing multiple workflows. Analysis is needed.
Good point. So when I say existing workflows, I believe you mean the system kind of plain vanilla. They call it plain vanilla. Yeah, that's another point. The client likes to over customize things. So that's another lessons learned. Don't over customize workflows and processes in your systems. it's a recipe for disaster. Okay, so just remember that. So good point. Thank you, Irina. Okay, question. We only have like 10 minutes left, so we're gonna have to run through this. Which one of these KPIs would finance typically monitor to measure overall project health? Is it employee satisfaction from accountants? I don't think so. Net promoter score, budget variance and ROI, and the number of project meetings held.
Right now, we're getting a lot of C's. Well, mostly C's in the chat.
Yeah, C is the right answer. C is the right answer. Why are we over budget? Why are we under budget? And what is our return? Okay, let's talk about risk management. So now we talked about organizational strategy. How do we link this cascading effect? How do we have governance that's representative of that? How can finance help? And now we're falling into enterprise risk management and project risk assessment. Okay, so question is, just let's take a poll. How effective is your organization's project risk management from a financial perspective? Are we getting mostly A's or B's?
B so far.
I put a B, but anyone else? I see another B. I see some B's come in.
Okay, well, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah, so far B's. We have one BC.
All right. That's
Mainly
good.
B's.
So mainly B's. Okay, so that's really good then. So, so in large decentralized organizations, mature organizations, they most likely have their own risk management or internal audit department. But in smaller organizations, of course, finance takes on a lot of responsibilities when it comes to risk management. So I'm going to share this framework with you. We're going to apply it to a risk assessment, and then we're going to get into a internal control framework project and see how finance helped on that. So very quickly, this is what we call a risk taxonomy. It's simplified. It's for a food manufacturing company, and basically what it is, it's all of your risks in your risk universe, we called it. Now, these are the categories at the top. Okay, so I'm sure you're familiar with them. The subcategories, there's more. Okay, we just simplified it so you can get the idea. And the idea is, okay, we understand all of our risks, we've identified them. How do we manage our exposure? What are the systems in place? What are the processes? Who is responsible for these risk types? How do we report on them? And so forth, okay? So very effective tool in managing risk. So this is like the foundation. Everything else stems from this, okay? So if we break this down further, and then I'm going to apply it to a project risk assessment. So we have what we call on the left side a risk hierarchy. So the risk categories, we saw them. The subcategories, we saw them. We have what we call a risk event. So something that happens. And then level 4 is a risk scenario, a specific scenario that happens that exposes the organization to financial loss. Okay. So if we take an example where, and these project risk assessments, if you never participated in them, they're for very large projects where there's risks that can be, if they materialize, could impact the organization's existence. Okay, so that's why they do risk assessments for very large projects. So like a large ERP implementation for a medium-sized organization that doesn't have infinite funding and resources or let's say capabilities to implement those types of systems, it's a big project for them. It's a big deal. Okay. So if we take this example, let's say we're implementing an ERP system. We take an example of technology and cyber risk. Level 2 or subcategory would be, what is our exposure to data breaches and cyber attacks? the risk event data exfiltration. So somebody, logs into one of your databases with all customer information, and then the risk scenario, external threat. Someone outside your organization compromises a bunch of information from your finance system, client data, sensitive data, and so forth. Okay. So let's say you're going to implement an ERP. This particular ERP doesn't encrypt client data, doesn't have a firewall. So you have your project risk, your scope, your timeline, your budget, and your resources, and so forth. But now you have this organizational risk resulting directly from your project. Okay. So as your project moves forward, right at inception, you need to have what you call a mitigation plan for that risk scenario. So in this case, they would put in a bunch of controls, find a vendor to have the firewall, set it up, test it, and so forth. Another synonymous term would be an action plan. But the point is that you need to have an action plan if that risk is deemed to be high enough, the probability is high, the impact is high, and you can't really necessarily put like a control on it that's gonna reduce the risk to an acceptable level. Okay, so the point of all this is that finance can help and say, okay, well, let's take a look at the risk. Let's take a look at the proposed mitigation plan. What is our exposure to this risk if it does materialize? Is the mitigation plan worth it? Is there ROI in it? How are we going to monitor this mitigation plan if we go with it? So the value that finance can bring here, we can quantify it, right? Is the cost benefit there? We can get it funded. Are there regulatory issues that we need to consider? What about monitoring? So as the project evolves, the mitigation plan should evolve as well. How do we follow up on this? How do we make sure things are going to get done the way they're supposed to get done? Insurance and transfer. So maybe someone will pay a premium to take on that risk and so forth. So I can see that we're pretty short on time. So I'm going to go through this quickly. Okay, case study, just one on this one. Any questions on this? Have you seen this before? Does this make sense? Is this new?
I didn't see any questions, but Tamika put in the chat, this sounds scary.
It's not scary if you look at it systematically in this way or another systematic way. If you don't look at it and something happens, that's the scary part. Yeah. So bring your finance people in to help you on your projects. Okay, internal control framework. So in this scenario, there's a large organization wanted to deploy an enterprise-wide internal control framework. So the business people operating on the front line understood the importance of controls, how they work, how they create them, how they test them, how they monitor them. So this project, again, no finance SME. Requirements, not well written, outdated, vague, ambiguous. No business processes. So the project team didn't understand what internal control was. So you can imagine the issues that arised in this project. And they didn't really take a holistic view on managing this project. It was very piecemeal. Okay. So what happened in this project and what are your thoughts?
Feel free to comment in the chat, or you can, if you'd like to come off mute and give your response, you can do so as well. Dr. Calvin noted you can cancel and start from scratch with the proper stakeholder team.
Oof. Yeah, this is a public company.
Tamika says chaos.
Yeah. This is a tough one. It was a high visibility one. So it's happened before in other projects where they kicked out the consulting firm and they kicked out people got fired, but not on this one. So okay.
There was one more comment, John, sorry, from David. He said, what are some of the disadvantages of having finance so heavily involved in the project? And I had Shayna made a comment, crash incoming.
Crash incoming. Okay. Number one, some of the inconveniences, sometimes the finance staff tends to be very, not very flexible. They don't take a holistic view on the project objectives. Uh, what are some workarounds that we can use? What is the real cost benefit? A lot of the times, finance staff is very sticking to their, well, this doesn't meet gap, and no, it's a manual process, I can't do that. So they can hinder the project moving forward if they don't have a mature way of looking at the big picture. So that's what I would say a disadvantage of having finance staff in. And that's where I've had to intervene a lot to align the stakeholders, particularly the finance, to get that bigger picture and help project reach their objectives. So that was
There was
number
a
one.
comment from, oh, go ahead, sorry, John.
No, go ahead with the comment.
Marilyn said if it's a public company, we would be under investigation and on the
No
news.
se puede hablar. ¿Verdad?
Yeah, so controls were there, but a holistic approach to, and we'll get to the solution here, a holistic approach to designing, testing, reporting, and all those nice, wonderful things about internal controls was not. Okay. Everyone had their own way of doing things. We'll get to that on the reporting slide. How much time do I have, Kamita?
You have till
Just checking.
7:50, John, so we're good.
Okay. So what happened in this project? It was over a year late. The management team didn't know where they were landed. They didn't know what was left to be done. It was really, really complicated. The finance SME that was onboarded on the project, well, it was me in this case. It was crisis mode, right? It was John, come fix it. So what we had to do is we had to look at the requirements again, right? Where are the requirements? We went one by one on those requirements, okay, for almost 4 weeks. Number two, there was no future state business processes. No one understood until we documented the business processes of what it is to do all the life cycle that I just described, assessing risk, creating a control, assigning a control, testing a control, evaluating it, all those things. It wasn't common knowledge for the project team. I mean, you have a poor corporate BA, PM, one is doing user stories, the other one is following the Scrum and the sprints, but no one knows exactly what they were doing. So, and there was no system architecture. So no one knew how everything was connected when, one event was done, how did it flow to another component of the system, or how does the reporting work? So basically it took 2 months to turn this around. Okay. And then come up with a revised project management plan. But once the project team was able to understand with these 3 items here, what are the processes? What are the requirements? How do our systems work? It was smooth sailing from there. So we went from being a year late to crisis mode to realigning the team, realigning what it is exactly that we were doing. And the client was able to do their UAT on their own after that. So it was a success story at the end. So moral of the story. Yeah.
Besides
comment.
besides the BA and the other individual you mentioned, David Axe, wasn't there a project team?
Absolutely, there was a project team, a pretty big project team. But in this particular case, what happened was they're under a lot of scrutiny to deliver. No one wanted to say, we don't know what we're doing. Okay. No one wanted to say internal control. I don't know what that is, right? Risk management. I don't know what that is. So you had like 60 requirements that were documented. Half of them were not requirements. You had no business processes. So they didn't have the right people to deliver this type of project. That's what happened. So by having finance staff that can put all that together, add that clarity, and then lay down the path forward so everyone understands it. That's what it took. It took that clarity because again, they were operating in agile as well. And one of the major risks with agile is if you don't plan out how I think they call it a storyboard or how the whole thing works, you arbitrarily start doing, configuring a system, writing user stories that are, not very detailed enough to understand what you're doing. Then you come into this state where the requirements are not clear. We don't know what to configure. Okay, where do we landed? So by having these processes, we're able to say, okay, there's 6 processes. We're able to do these 3. We're able to, create a control, test a control, and do reporting on the performance, for example, of that control. So the project team didn't have the right resourcing. Kind of a long, descriptive answer, but I hope it answers the question. Anything else?
So. I don't have anything else in the chat so far.
Okay, good. So, enterprise risk management. How does finance support the project team? Managing HR risks, assessing and quantifying financial impacts of risks, conducting operational safety inspections, and ensuring compliance with environmental regulations. Anything in the chat?
I have a lot of B so far.
Oh, well, that's right. B is correct. This is a little bit of an easy one, to be honest. Yeah, definitely quantify risk. What is the impact if this risk materializes? What is the cost to put the controls in place? Is there cost benefit? Does it make sense? Can we put it in place? So on. Yeah, that's the answer. Okay. Now we're going to get into a reporting one. So, analytics, data management. So we all know this is right now as we speak, this is massive. Data analytics, real-time data, artificial intelligence, AWS, all of that stuff. Cybersecurity is tied to that. So question, to what extent does your finance function use data analytics and dashboards in your organization?
John, while people are putting their answers in the chat, Dr. Kreese put a comment in the chat. She said, in 2 of the agile cases, you mentioned that the role of finance could have been improved. What do you think finance professionals need to share with teams or be better prepared in order to execute their roles in the agile project environments?
We talked about that before, huh? Yeah. Okay, so very good question. So finance, we're trained to be very process-oriented, methods, terminology, structured, so if you take an example of you're procuring a loan, okay, there's specific steps that you take to get that loan. You originate a loan, you do a credit application, you disperse the loan. Each one of those things has debits and credits. You disperse the loan, you collect interest, and so on and so on. So it's very systematic and logical. Okay. So the finance perspective is, okay, can we disperse this loan? And do we have all of our accounting data for the interest, collections, loans that are past due? Can we do our reporting? Yes or no? All right. And if the answer is no, then it's okay. Well, you need to go make sure everything works the way it's supposed to work, right? If you want to get them into agile mode, you need to make sure that you communicate. I understand the lending process from A to Z, okay? And the way you break it down has to match that story. So meaning in sprint 1, 2, and 3, we're going to originate a loan, we're going to disperse it, but we won't be able to test the obsolescence of that loan until Scrum number 5, for example, which is at the end of the loan anyways, right? And they'll say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's at the end. We can do the beginning. So that's how you would bring them on board, and then explain to them that you'll be able to start doing loans faster if we do this in agile mode. If we do this in waterfall, you won't be able to disperse any loans till 18 months from now. So how do you feel about that? So that's the way I would position that. But you need to show them definitely that you understand the end-to-end process, or else it becomes very abstract. I don't know if that makes sense, Doctor.
Thank you, John, for that. Chris, I don't know if you want to say anything else, but if not, we can continue. For your question that you posed in the, oh, she said yes, that does answer a question. For your data management and analytics question, we got a lot of B's in the chat, but there were a few 1A, 1AB, and then the rest were B's.
Okay, good. So most of them are using dashboards and so on. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to try to do this very, very quickly. Okay, so if you're non-finance staff and you have a project where you're building out dashboards for marketing or for HR or for another organization, they might not have a detailed understanding of how information works. Okay. So on the left, you have some information assertions. So in order to build out dashboards and reliable reporting, relevance and reliability, they need to be complete, accurate, timely. Data needs to be comparable. There's other ones, but the point here is that there's a structure to the information. Okay. We're going to move to the case study very quickly because we have non-finance staff trying to build out dashboards and reporting. But where finance will add value to this project, number one, what KPIs are you looking for and why? What is the requirement behind that metric or that dashboard? Number two, data integrity, right? We have a very good understanding of making sure data is accurate, it's complete, it's reliable. The concept of cutoff, you don't want backdated transactions, duplicate transactions. You don't want the data laying around that's not controlled, monitored, tested periodically, and so forth. Benchmarking, okay, so they can help you do research as to these KPIs, what do we compare them to, right? Competition, or again, going back to the org strategy, how do we map those KPIs to the org strategy? And the whole reporting model, on day one, we do these activities. On day two, we do adjustments. On day three, we circulate the first report for validation and so on. Okay. So very high level, that's the closing or report preparation process. So here we have a current state, future state of a non-finance organization trying to build out integrated reporting, dashboards, data, to do business intelligence studies, things like this. So on the left side, you have each business line that have their own systems, their own reporting channels, their own reports, their own data structures. And on the right side, what they wanted to do is, okay, well, let the businesses integrate all the information in a centralized platform, and then we can go ahead and start exploiting the data. Okay. So from going from left to right without finance involvement, what is your view on some of the risks here that may happen with this?
If anyone wants to come off mute, or you can put your answer in the chat, feel free to do so. Any takers? Okay. I don't have anything, nothing's come through just yet, John. So I don't know if you want to just continue.
Okay. So very quickly, what happened is that, well, let's say business line number 1 reports 4 days after cutoff. Business line number 2 reports 2 days after cutoff. This one has data structured, 5 columns, and this one has data structured 10 columns, and these KPIs. So when it came time to, I go back to the target operating model, right? Who is responsible for this data? When do we prepare the consolidated reports? How do we know it's accurate and complete? All those processes and governance were not defined as part of the project. Okay. So what you have is basically a data lake with information that may or may not be relevant and reliable. So why is that important? Well, if you're a marketing team and you want to make investment decisions on campaigns, well, you want to make sure the data is accurate, right? If you have HR staff where you're giving them compensation and bonus based on the data that's in the system, you better make sure it's accurate, right? So that's the moral of the story. Finance can help bring those processes and those controls to help the business lines make better decisions, get higher quality data faster, and help them make better business decisions. That's the point there. Any comments, any thoughts on that? Has anybody ever worked on a reporting project before? And what was the outcome? What were the challenges you faced?
Don't be shy. Please feel free to either raise your hand or just come off mute and give your feedback if you'd like to do so, or put anything in the chat. Anyone have
I
an
think the
example?
biggest challenge with reporting is what you said with processes. And so when you have different business entities that are rolled up into one corporate entity, and their processes are so different, and so trying to get that standardized reporting, or trying to get that. I see somebody put non-standard data collection. That is a challenge. So we're always challenged on our projects where it's not specifically a reporting project, but there's a reporting component to it of getting reporting that's going to be beneficial for everyone.
And how long do those projects take, and are they usually on schedule?
Good question. It depends, right?
I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Correct. So usually what will happen with some of my projects I've seen where we can deliver some part of the reporting feature, but it's that reporting feature is going to slip, because when you said it, hit a nail on the head, that making all these customizations, it really kills the system and it kills reporting. So we've always run into, okay, we can deliver this for right now, but to go back to all that customization and then try to get reporting around that customization becomes more of the challenge.
100%. Thank you for sharing that.
There was 2 comments in the chat, John, one from Irina, that says that the challenge is a different data structure, types, reporting, etc. And then Stanley noted, get necessary data to provide an accurate report.
So both are valid. Structuring data goes back to what I said as the first thing. You need to take a look at what you're doing before you build it out. So absolutely, that's an issue, especially when you have different systems, different data structures, different products. And then number 2, sometimes the data doesn't exist. It's not captured by the system, the source system, the transaction system. So either you need to go get it, you need to create it, or you need to find a manual workaround, that we hear that often, to go ahead and build it out. So absolutely.
All right, we're at 7:52, John. I don't know if you want
to. Look, I'll just conclude by saying thank you thank you very much for being here. I appreciate your time. I know it's very late. You're taking time away from your family. I hope this added value. I hope this helps unblock certain things in your projects. Just to let you know, finance staff is not some stakeholder that has nothing to do with a project. They should be there to help you. They should be your business partner. They should provide you with expertise, unbiased views on things, and most importantly, uh, value. They're there to create value. So if any of you have any questions, I might have some white papers or templates or anything that I can help you with to unblock these projects. At the end of the day, I'm here to help people, and I know these things are complex, especially if it's the first time where you're in this scenario that you haven't encountered before. Reach out to me. I will happily help you.
Before we go, does anyone have any questions? We do have about 7 minutes left in the chat. Anyone have any questions for John's presentations? Just to answer some of the questions in the chat, we will be providing a copy of the presentation slide. I'm sorry, John, if you don't mind, there was a QR code. I'd like to share, there is an event survey that we have for this event. So if you can please complete the event survey for us. For those who complete the event survey, we will send you a copy of the presentation slide. If you're not able to get the QR code to complete the event survey tonight, we will also send out the survey tomorrow for you to get it. PDUs will be allocated to you. It may take a few days to get it done, but we will be, being registered for the event, you will be provided the 1 PDU for today. Let me see, I don't know if I missed any other questions. And we will be entering the PDU for you, so you do not have to go on to the website to enter it yourself. So any other questions that anyone would like to ask John?
Well, I'd like to thank the team. I think you all did a fantastic job in putting this together, and we all took a lot of time. So thank you very much to all of you.
No, thank you, John. Someone, PJ asked a question, said disclaimer, I'm a newbie. How to change the narrative that finance is a hindrance to the project rather than an aid?
Look, that's a simple question, a complicated answer, because there's a lot of factors to consider: interpersonal, levels of experience, the environment. But I think one way to do it is to ask questions, like and maybe communicate your expectations clearly. Say, hey, we're working on this type of project. Can you do help us assess risk? Can you quantify mitigation plans? Because me as a project manager, I'm expecting that. And if that's not something you can do, maybe someone on your team can help us. Can you help us with that? That type of approach.
And another question, Steve, the session is recorded. In a few days, we will also be uploading a copy of this recording to our chapter YouTube channel, so you'll be able to rewatch. And is there any other questions for John before we close out? Okay, with no takers, John, I would like to thank you so much for your amazing presentation, the amazing time that you took to meet with us and just share your knowledge and experience with our chapter. I would like you to close out and just give us one more time where those who are on the call tonight can reach out to you if they'd like to have any additional questions, or just reach out to you for, again, like the templates and information that you said that you could share with them.
Okay, thank you so much, Kitima. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, John L. Shallowy. You can go to our website, visionstrategyoffice.com, or you can call me. My number is in the presentation. Like I said, we're in this industry to help people. I think people misunderstand the role of project managers as well. We wear a lot of hats. We play the role of psychologist sometimes, BA, trusted advisor, and so on. And my passion is to help people get through that. These are at times stressful, tense jobs that we're working on. So if I can help you move forward, that's my purpose. That's why I'm here.
Great. Well, maybe we have 3 minutes left in the call. So if no one has any further questions to ask John, I thank you for, again, coming out tonight and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, John.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.